In this video, we'll be making the lead synth from the song Goin, the remix by Skrillex, the hard mix. So I'll show you what the final product's going to sound like here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is create a combinator. Inside the combinator, we're going to start off with a line mixer 6.2. You really don't need this, but just in case you want to layer anything on top of it later, it's good to create this from the beginning. So we're going to create a Thor, and we're going to start by putting it as mono retrig. And basically that's, you can strike a single note at a time, and if you have a note back to back, it'll re-trigger the sound. So we're going to show programmer, and we're going to change the first oscillator to a multi-oscillator. We'll leave it as octave 4. We'll leave it as a random. And the amount, we can increase it up to 34. This amount is how much the oscillator gets detuned. So now we can enable our second multi-oscillator. It'll be left as octave 4. We'll switch it to random 2 detune mode. And this one will be slightly more detuned. It'll be at 41. And make sure that you enable both oscillators up here. We're going to use this low pass ladder filter. We'll first disable the self oscillator. Now we're going to bring the drive up to 89, and basically it'll push it a little harder and make it a bit more distorted and gritty. We're going to bring the frequency up to 6.25 kilohertz. Now we can go down to this little mixer section here, and this button here is going to change the balance between the first and second oscillator. We want it to primarily favor the first oscillator, so we'll bring this down to about 46. We want this shaper on, and we're going to hard clip it, and this will also slightly distort and make the sound a bit grittier. We'll increase this to about 52. Now we're going to be using this mod envelope to adjust the slide in the sound. So first we can increase the attack to about 47 milliseconds. And if you shift left click while you're moving these knobs up and down, it will get you a little bit more precise to where you're trying to get the faders. This decay can go up to about 7.77. And this is, the decay is how long it takes for the slide to reach the designated note, and the attack is how long it takes to start the slide. So we're going to move down to this filter envelope and the amp envelope down here. Both of the sustains need to be at full, and the amp envelope attack is going to be reduced just a slight bit to 5.3 milliseconds. There was a bit of a thud at the beginning in this, I'll get rid of it. So now we're going to move into the matrix. You're going to want to set up that the mod envelope for your source on the first 2 lines. and the destination to be the oscillator's pitches. So the first one will be oscillator 1 pitch, the second one will be oscillator 2 pitch. And you can increase these amount to 66. One thing you have to make sure is these amounts have to be exactly the same. So now I'm just going to copy over some notes, and you can hear what the basic synth patch sounds like before we process it. So there's too much low end, and it needs a bit more mid-range, which we'll get in a minute. First, we're going to create a equalizer. So we can just immediately turn on the low cut 30. And that'll cut frequencies below 30 hertz. Now, if you have a high-pass filter on your mixer, you can just jump straight to your mixer, and right here, you would find your channel strip for it. For this, it'll be just Combinator 2 because I did not rename it. And enable the high-pass filter and bring it up to about 315 hertz. And what this does, as you can see here, it basically chops everything off in this little highlighted section right here. It's a lot easier to do it this way than to do it through the EQs, but if you don't have this accessible to you, I'll show you how to do it through the EQ. This way also works a lot better than the EQ. So if you don't have access to that high-pass filter, what you can do is do it through this M-class equalizer. It's not going to sound nearly as good, but at least it will. It'll help significantly. So you can reduce the low shelf gain to about 18.3, which is as far as it goes, and the Q all the way to the left. That way, this little hump here gets taken away. Sort of flatlines a little better. So now you can enable parameter 1 frequency, enable parameter 1 and set the frequency to about 120 hertz. So with this at 120 hertz, we're just going to get rid of this little bit left over here. We're going to reduce this by about 9.1 decibels and put the Q to 1.9. And you can see essentially it's the same as what it looked like on the spectrum analyzer, but it doesn't do the job nearly as good, but it is a workaround if you don't have access to that low pass or high pass filter, sorry. So you want to enable parameter 2. We're actually going to cut a tiny bit from the mids at 600 hertz. I'm going to cut 4.6 decibels, and that'll make it sound a little fatter. And we'll bring the Q to 4.6. Now the high shelf, we can boost by 2.3 decibels. And I'll just play this back for you so you can see the difference with the EQ. So now we're going to add one last EQ. The reason I added this EQ is there's a frequency that was a tiny bit harsh. I really disliked it. So it's actually at 862 hertz, and I'm going to pull this down to 9.7, and we're going to bring the Q all the way up, and that just is going to cut out a little bit of that frequency that I didn't like. I can play it back, boosting that frequency so you can really hear how it resonates, and how if it was cranked up, you would probably notice the frequency a little harder. So if you're wearing headphones, be warned, this may hurt your ears a tiny bit. So you can see that there's a little resonating there, and I just didn't like that frequency, so I cut it a tiny bit to get rid of it. Now we're going to add a distortion to it, and this is really going to bring out the mids. So first off, just reduce this master to about 80. The distortion is going to bring up the volume a slight bit. We'll set the damage control down to 32. And we'll put it as tape distortion. We're going to put the speed all the way up, and we're going to compress it to about 61. Now we're going to enable this body section, and we'll flip it over to type E with a resonance of 98, scale of 17, and auto of 90. So I'll play it back again so you can hear the difference with the distortion. So it sounds nice with a bit of mid boost, and it's a bit grittier now. And there's one last thing you can do, which is add a reverb. It's a relatively dry signal, but the reverb adds a nice little tail to it. So we're going to add the RV7000 reverb. We can expand the programmer. This dry wet's going to go all the way down to 6, so it's barely going to be affecting it. We're going to set the algorithm to room and increase the size all the way to the right, which is 14.1 meters. You can hear the sound again. Thanks for watching.